Welcome, friends. You're watching the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we have a packed episode. A great deal has happened over the past 24 hours and across several theaters of operations simultaneously. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you to hit the bell and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. YouTube is systematically suppressing the reach of military analytical content. The platform's algorithms are increasingly pushing channels like ours into shadow bans, and without your direct support, many subscribers simply stop receiving notifications about new episodes. The bell notification is the only reliable way to never miss a single breakdown. Now then, let's go through everything in order. Sumy direction, Russian units encircling Myropoli. We'll begin in the north, on the Sumy sector of the front, where the first notable map correction was recorded today. Pro-Ukrainian sources have published footage from the area of the settlement of Myropoli. The recordings show FPV drone strikes against Russian units moving across open fields toward Myropoli from a southeastern vector. That fact alone is already noteworthy. As a rule, such footage is published by the Ukrainian side to demonstrate the successful use of anti-drone barriers. But in this case, the nature of the video suggests the opposite, that Russian forces continue to advance. The totality of publications that have appeared over the past 24 hours, including data from several mapping services, including pro-Russian ones, indicates that the Russian army is conducting an envelopment of Myropoli from multiple directions simultaneously. While no confirmed footage from within the settlement itself is yet publicly available, the existing data suggests that Russian units have already entered its boundaries and have likely begun consolidating on initial strongpoints. We are watching this area closely. The picture should become clearer within the next 24 hours. Kharkiv direction, the biggest map correction of the week. Okremivka, Zaibini, Vovchansky Khutori. We move now to the Kharkiv sector of the front. And this is arguably where the most significant events of the entire past week are concentrated. The map has undergone substantial changes, and to properly appreciate the scale of what is happening, it is essential to view the situation in terms of its trajectory, rather than limiting the analysis to a single day's snapshot. Today, Ukrainian sources published footage dedicated to the fighting on the territory of the settlement of Okremivka. The footage captures the work of Ukrainian assault groups attempting to counter Russian advances. Geolocation analysis of the recording allowed for the identification of specific event points. One location shows a close-quarters firefight between Russian units and Ukrainian assault troops. Another shows FPV drone strikes against Russian positions. The very fact that the Ukrainian side chose to publish this footage is itself indirect confirmation of how serious the situation has become. The conclusions drawn from analysis of the video material are weighty. Russian units have achieved significant advances in this sector. Furthermore, Russian forces managed to push deep into a large forested area along the state border to force a crossing of the Vovcha River, and appear to have already made their first attempts to consolidate on the territory of Okremivka itself. Let us now trace the week's trajectory. This is critically important for understanding the underlying logic of events. As of April 14, 2026, the front line on the Kharkiv sector looked fundamentally different. It was during that period that the first reports began to emerge of the Russian army resuming its active offensive following the Easter ceasefire regime, simultaneously across the entire border perimeter of the Chernihiv, Sumy, and Kharkiv oblasts. By the end of April 15th, the map already reflects Russian advances in the area of Vovchansky Khutori. 2 days later, the North grouping of forces, subsequently confirmed by an official statement from the Russian Ministry of Defense, reported a significant improvement of positions in the Zibine area. This data was verified by video materials published directly by the Ukrainian side, showing both long-range strikes and close-quarters combat in specific blocks of the settlement. Another 2 days on, reports emerge of Russian advances in the northwestern sector, in the area of the already mentioned Okremivka. The strategic objective of Russian operations in this direction is clear and consistent: to establish full control over the Vovcha River and, crucially, over its southern bank. We are talking about an entire belt of settlements: Budaki, Varvarivka, Malavovcha, Okremivka, Volokivka, Chaikivka, Karaichne. All of these villages sit on the Ukrainian side of the river and collectively form the very bridgehead whose capture would open broad operational prospects for further movement deep into Kharkiv Oblast, toward Bily Kolodiaz, Veliki Burluk, and Mali Burluk. The Ukrainian command's response is entirely predictable. A large-scale redeployment of personnel from the Kupiansk sector to the Vovchansk direction has been confirmed. The objective is to stabilize the situation, prevent a breakthrough, and block the formation of a consolidated bridgehead. However, this is precisely the move that the Russian side appears to have been waiting for. Worthy of separate attention is the information about strikes on the Pecheniska Dam carried out several days ago. The hydraulic structure remains intact. The strikes did not succeed in destroying it. Nevertheless, it appears that these were ranging strikes designed to confirm targeting coordinates and test the air defense systems protecting the facility. One might reasonably suppose that at the critical moment, when the situation on either the Vovchansk or Kupiansk direction demands an emergency solution, this card will be played. For now, the Russian side is keeping it in reserve. Kupiansk direction, infiltration tactics, and the reserve factor. We turn now to the Kupiansk sector of the front, and here it is impossible not to note the remarkable operational logic that the Russian side is demonstrating. The activation on the Kupiansk axis followed precisely 3 days after it became evident that Ukrainian reserves were being redeployed toward the Vovchansk direction. In other words, Russian command deliberately held back, allowing a portion of Ukrainian reserves to shift northward. And only once a clear deficit of manpower on the Kupiansk line had materialized did it strike here. As of April 17th, the Kupiansk sector remained relatively stable. By April 18th, reports were already emerging of Russian advances in the northwestern part of the city, in the area of the Stadium Square and the Central Market. A geolocation-verified video recording confirms the presence of Russian forces in the Yuveleny residential district. The character of current Russian operations in Kupiansk deserves its own analysis. What appears on the map are not continuous lines of advance, but isolated islands, presumed positions of reconnaissance and sabotage groups that have filtered through the Ukrainian defensive lines. This is entirely explicable. When manpower is in short supply, conventional assault tactics give way to infiltration tactics. Small, mobile teams penetrate deep into the defensive structure, disrupt rear area operations, and apply psychological pressure to the defenders. In the coming days, the number of such islands on the Kupiansk map will likely grow, and only as they merge into cohesive bridgeheads will it become possible to speak of systematic control over the northwestern quarters of the city. In parallel, attempts by the Ukrainian side to reinforce its grouping via the H-26 highway have been noted. According to available information, this redeployment either failed to materialize or was substantially disrupted. The highway is partially under Russian fire control. All of this means that within the next day or two, the Kupiansk sector will in all likelihood become one of the key focal points of activity. Lyman and Sloviansk directions. Artillery preparation continues. On the Lyman sector, the map shows no changes, but activity is being recorded. The primary fighting is unfolding in the eastern part of the city, in the area of the Central District Polyclinic. The Russian side is conducting a methodical artillery preparation of fortified Ukrainian positions in that area. The deliberate, focused nature of the fire effort suggests preparation for a renewed assault. An attempt to take this strongpoint may follow within the next few days. To the south, in the area of Mykolaiivka and west of Kryva Luka, active fighting is being observed along the principal supply and evacuation routes. No map corrections have been recorded, but the situation warrants continued monitoring. On the Sloviansk direction, no changes have been recorded. Constantinovka and Balka, leaflet drop as a precursor to assault. The situation on the Constantinovka direction is ambiguous. One of the video materials that appeared in open sources today, purportedly filmed in the eastern part of the city, subsequently proved to be archival footage. The author of the recording himself acknowledged that it was made approximately 1 month ago. In such cases, making map corrections on the basis of outdated data would be methodologically unsound, so for now only an area of interest has been marked on the map. At the same time, the southern part of Constantinovka does show signs of slow but steady Russian progress. The pace is low, but the vector is unchanged. Slightly to the west, in the area of Dova Balka, a telling detail was recorded. Russian UAVs carried out leaflet drops over Ukrainian positions, offering troops the option to surrender or abandon their positions without a fight. The leaflet drop covered virtually every part of the settlement without exception. In military practice, such an action typically precedes a decisive assault. In essence, it is an ultimatum wrapped in paper. And given the scale of the distribution, this appears to be the final warning before a transition to active assault operations. Dnipropetrovsk direction, Novo Alexandrika, and the operational breakout. On the Dnipropetrovsk direction, a small but significant map correction has been recorded in the area of Novo Alexandrika. Geolocation analysis of the past 24 hours allows for a firm conclusion. Russian units have taken control of all positions south of the Tretyi Yar ravine. A confirmed crossing of the ravine itself has not yet appeared in footage, though it is an extremely modest obstacle, in places literally a step across, and holding it as a natural barrier is simply not a viable proposition. Ukrainian sources openly acknowledge the criticality of the situation. Should Novo Alexandrivka fall, Russian forces would break into open operational terrain and gain the capacity to move north toward the Vodyansky settlement cluster. A small grouping of villages anchored by the brick-built core of Vodyansky itself. Simultaneously, fighting continues around Belitske, where the intensity of engagements is also expected to increase in the near term. Dnipropetrovsk direction, 2 bridgeheads across the Vovcha River. On the Dnipropetrovsk direction, the operational situation is developing across 2 separate bridgeheads, divided along the course of the Vovcha River. The northern bridgehead. In the area of the settlements of Ivanivka and Novopavlivka, Russian units have made tangible progress over recent months. According to assessments from several independent pro-Russian analysts, Novopavlivka today is approximately 40% under Russian army control. Simultaneously, an expansion of the buffer zone north of Ivanivka is being recorded. Russian forces are methodically advancing toward Mazhova, the southern bridgehead, and here the picture is considerably more acute. The east grouping of forces conducted a lightning-fast operation, crossing the Vovcha River northwest of Alexandrograd and consolidating in the southwestern portion of the Novopavlivsky Forest Reserve. The strike appears to have caught the Ukrainian command by surprise. At present, the Ukrainian armed forces are conducting intensive counterattacks in an effort to prevent the final formation of a bridgehead. Should Russian units succeed in holding their positions within the forest and force the Ukrainian side to withdraw, an operational corridor would open in 2 directions simultaneously, toward Havrilivka from the south and toward Velikomykhailivka from the east and northeast. It is worth noting that Ukrainian sources have largely remained silent on events at this sector, and that silence is itself eloquent. The Zaporizhzhia sector, no changes. Middle East, the Strait of Hormuz closed again. 3 carrier strike groups. The China factor now, the Middle East, where the situation is developing rapidly and already involves not merely regional players, but the global economy. To recap the context, yesterday, Iranian authorities officially announced the renewed closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The stated reason, a gross violation of ceasefire terms by the United States. According to Tehran's interpretation of the agreement, Washington was obligated to lift all restrictions on shipping through the strait, and failed to do so. The strait is closed. The situation has been raised to the boiling point once again. Diplomatic activity, however, continues in parallel. An American delegation has already been dispatched to Islamabad. Another round of US-Iran talks, hosted on Pakistani territory, is expected tomorrow. In expert circles and across American media, a clear signal is being sounded. If no deal is reached within the next 3 days, hostilities will resume at a fundamentally different level of intensity. The current escalation of rhetoric from both sides is, in essence, positioning before the final round of bargaining. The reaction on oil markets will be immediate. Recall that as of Friday, April 17th, following the temporary announcement of the strait's unblocking, prices had fallen to the level of $83 per barrel. As of this morning, the situation has changed fundamentally. Markets will in all likelihood open at $93, effectively vaulting the entire intermediate price corridor in the very first seconds of trading. Now to the military dimension, and here the picture is rather striking. The United States has been systematically assembling its strike force throughout the duration of the ceasefire, and that process is now nearly complete. The first carrier strike group, the USS Abraham Lincoln, has been stationed in the Arabian Sea since the very beginning of the conflict. It is the anchor of the entire American grouping in the region. The second strike group, the USS Gerald R. Ford, has completed all preparatory and repair work and is positioned in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. It is accompanied by the French carrier strike group led by the Charles de Gaulle, oriented by all appearances toward defensive tasks in the Cyprus area and political pressure within the Israeli-Lebanese track. The third strike group, the USS George H.W. Bush, according to incoming data, has already passed the Madagascar area and has either entered or transited the Mozambique Channel. The distance remaining to the Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea is approximately 4,000 kilometers, a gap coverable within a matter of days. When the Bush arrives in the Arabian Sea, the American side will have 2 full carrier strike groups concentrated there, with a full escort of destroyers, cruisers, and submarines. At that point, a comprehensive naval blockade will begin, and strikes against Iranian territory will, in all probability, resume. Analysts tracking the pace of the deployment are reaching a sobering conclusion. The current level of military concentration and the volume of munitions and weaponry now being moved into the region already exceeds the figures observed on the eve of the first phase of the conflict, that is, in January-February 2026. This indicates that the second phase of operations is being planned as something qualitatively different in scale, the China factor. And here, a fundamentally new element, one capable of reshaping the entire geometry of the confrontation. According to available information, China has deployed 2 naval vessels to the area of the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf of Oman, the destroyer Tangshan and the frigate Daking. The stated mission to escort Chinese commercial tankers and cargo vessels carrying oil and liquefied natural gas out of the Persian Gulf. No illusions should be entertained about the combat potential of these 2 vessels relative to the American Armada. Their function is symbolic and political. Sailing at the head of the Chinese merchant fleet, they transmit a signal. Beijing intends to ensure the uninterrupted flow of its energy supplies regardless of American restrictions. The central question now is this: will the United States risk a direct confrontation with Chinese naval vessels, even in the form of a symbolic maneuver? If such an incident does occur, China is unlikely to respond with force in the immediate operational timeframe. However, Beijing would gain a weighty political pretext for dispatching its own carrier strike groups to the Arabian Sea. And that changes everything. Under such a scenario, America's Hormuz blockade transforms from a military operation into a diplomatic crisis of global proportions. The blockade run. Today, information emerged that 4 commercial vessels, presumed to be cruise liners, passed through the Strait of Hormuz at full speed and exited the blockade zone without sustaining damage. Other commercial ships, according to available reports, are approaching the strait, turning around and returning, unwilling to risk forcing the closed corridor. Southern Lebanon, the ceasefire regime in this area also appears to have finally collapsed. Low-intensity fighting is being recorded over a bridgehead south of the Litani River. This is only the beginning. By tomorrow morning, hostilities here may also flare up to full intensity. Summary: the picture of the day is both large in scale and deeply concerning. On the Ukrainian front, the Russian army is exploiting Ukrainian reserve redeployments to its advantage, systematically opening new pressure points. Okhrymivka, Kupansk, Novo Alexandrika, Novopavlivsky Forest. In the Middle East, the world is balancing on a knife's edge between a final diplomatic round and a military escalation that threatens to draw in not only the United States and Iran, but China as well, with all the resulting consequences for global energy markets and international finance. Keep watching our channel. Within the next 24 to 48 hours, key verification footage should emerge either confirming or refuting today's corrections. The moment new data arrives, we will break it down immediately. If this episode proved useful, leave a like and share it with those for whom it matters. Remember, YouTube does not surface videos like this in recommendations, so it is only your actions that determine whether anyone else gets to see it. Until the next episode, take care of yourselves.